Hey, crew, welcome back to another episode in the series Women in Telemark Skiing, brought to you by the Skippy Report. In this episode, I have as my guest Madi McKinstry, all the way from Bozeman, Montana. She's a hardcore, ripping telemark skier, pro patroller at Big Sky in Montana, and in the off-season, she's a river guide. Anyway, so grab yourself a beverage. I've got one in hand. While you sit down and enjoy this episode of us discussing how she got into telemark skiing and where it has taken her, along with her river guiding. Enjoy. The bread just came out of the oven like 2 minutes ago.
Oh, nice.
My wife, I thought my wife would be here and she could take care of the bread. And she goes, "No, I'm not going to be there." I was like, okay, 1 minute to spare.
So that's okay, because I'm also meal prepping for my work week, and I was like, oh, I'll just turn the oven off, add the cheese, and walk away.
So it's so nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Yeah, I've heard of you through, I guess, a lot of the stuff that Josh Madsen has done and stuff that you've done that I've seen on the interweb. So thanks for sitting down and doing this episode of Women in Telemark Skiing.
Yeah, well, thanks for doing this series, because I think it's cool that you want to focus on it and that people actually are listening and wanting to listen.
I know. I was telling somebody I feel like a real podcaster because I've got your episode's going to air like in February.
Nice.
There's that many people every 2 weeks. I know ski season has started for you out there, but I was trying to nail everybody before ski season started, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, so tell us who you are and where you are.
Yeah, I'm Madi McKinstry. I'm based in Bozeman, Montana. I've been here. This will be season number 13.
Wow.
Yeah, I came here for college and then never left.
Did you go to college with Corey Schneider?
So, yeah, Corey and I were on the U.S. team from like 2008 or so, all the way up until I stopped racing, and then he carried on a few more years. And then he came to Montana State to do his master's and then moved to Austria to do his PhD.
Yeah, that's kind of cool because in my background I have a lot of biomechanics and kinesiology and all that sort of stuff. So when I interviewed him a long time ago, we kind of geeked out on that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I miss him so much. He's still in Austria, obviously.
Yes.
And he's doing all the stuff with Red Bull and actually using his brain, which is pretty cool.
I saw a post with Lindsey Vaughn and looked like him putting her through the grinder. So I dropped a little note and he sent it back. Could be.
Yeah.
So you're out in...
I did this.
What's that?
Oh, sorry. Go. Oh, I was just saying I was scrolling through Instagram, the day that she posted that, and I thought it was his post.
Oh, okay.
I was like, oh, look, it's Corey with Lindsey Vaughn. And then I was like, oh my God, Lindsey Vaughn posted that.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. So you're in Bozeman, you went there for school, and you've stayed.
Yeah.
That's cool. I've been through Bozeman once. Maybe, just once. Yeah, I'd like to get back there. My family wanted to go and ski there, and I said, we'd have to fly. We have to go to Calgary. Then we take a little regional plane, probably, and our gear won't come with us. It'll be on another flight. Then we have to rent a 10-seater van to go to Big Sky. I'll just drive. It's only 27 hours.
Yeah, because you're over in Toronto, right?
I am, yes. Yeah, an hour east of Toronto, right across Lake Ontario from Rochester.
Okay.
Yeah, wow. So you went to Montana, went to Bozeman for school, stayed, and here you are. Well, so what happened in between?
Well, so I guess I ended up at Montana State because they had an alpine racing program, through the NCAA and everything, and they had a pretty good team. And at the time, I was still telemark racing. So when I was kind of choosing where to go to college, there was the question of, well, do you stay in Steamboat? Because I went to high school in Steamboat, Colorado.
Okay.
And I could have stayed there and kind of done the community college thing and kept training with the Winter Sports Club there, which would have been a great option. Or Bozeman also had the Bridger Ski Foundation that was kind of similar to the Winter Sports Club and Steamboat. And they had coaches, and I maybe could have trained with them. But I think my mom might have suggested it, but she was like, why don't you just reach out to the Alpine coach at MSU and see if you could join the team, and then you would have a dryland program and training program with them, and then like just do your own races and still be a telemark skier. You'd never have to do any of the Alpine races. And I kind of thought that might not work because I know that NCAA, like collegiate racing, is a pretty big deal.
Right.
But it turns out at MSU, and I think at a lot of schools, the Title IX law
Right.
is you have to have so many girls to boys in different sports disciplines. And MSU has a really big football team.
Right.
And no like female counterpart to that. So on the Alpine team, to have a full team of 6 males, you have to have 12 females, but you can only send 6 and 6 to regionals, and then I think only 3 and 3 to like nationals.
Okay.
So I kind of ended up being a placeholder, and yeah, the coach at the time was just like, yeah, for sure, like seems legit if you race World Cup telemark, like
Yeah.
you must be, you know, disciplined and like actually want to do this. So that was pretty rad. It was actually a lot of Canadians were on the Alpine team when I was there, and yeah, we all are still friends.
There are a lot of Canadians on ski teams, I think, in the NCAA.
Yeah.
I have some friends who went to high school in Vermont at like Green Mountain Academy, I think, ski academy.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like hockey, I guess. Hockey and skiing. Yeah, we'll have the Canadians come down.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of how it goes for a lot of colleges, not even with Canadians, but for Europeans too.
Right.
Like I have 4 Swedish cousins, and one of them came over and went to MSU the same time frame that I was here.
Cool.
And he was also on the ski team.
Right.
So it was kind of cool to like get to train with family.
So how did you get into telemark skiing?
My dad was a big ski racer, like his whole life in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And when he retired from alpine racing, he found telemark as kind of a way to rekindle his love for skiing, kind of in the late 80s, early 90s. And he started tellying. And then when my mom and him had me, my mom tellied a little bit, not a ton. She is from Laguna Beach, California, and kind of skiing was her, you know, like vacation time.
Right.
But marrying my dad, it became more of a real focus. And so she was always on telly gear when I was a kid. They both were. And then when I kind of started to put together that they skied differently than I did when I was old enough to understand, I kept asking why I couldn't ski like them. And they were like, well, you can one day. Your boots you need to be able to fit in the boots.
Right.
So when I was about 10, I could fit into my mom's old boots. And then I got to telemark after that.
Right on. Right on. That's sounds like, I think it was Eliza and Brickley Biondi from Tellemummies. They said, yeah, we had the cool telemark parents.
Yeah.
And then I was just listening to I think it was the last episode of the Pretty Good Telemark show, and Adam and CJ were saying that telemark is a dad sport. I guess it is, because quite a few of the women that I'm interviewing, they said, oh yeah, my dad used to telemark, or my dad telemarks, you know, so I guess it is a bona fide dad sport.
Yeah. Which is not a bad thing.
No. And it's good that they're sharing their love of skiing with their daughters. Yeah. I had a daughter who wanted to play hockey. I said no. For what it costs for one person to play hockey in Canada, the whole family can ski anywhere and everywhere for an entire season. So, anyway, so you started telemark skiing when you're 10. You're racing in the World Cup when you're 17, 18?
Yeah, I made the U.S. telly team when I was 15.
15?
Yeah, so I did my first World Cup ever was in Bjorli, Norway.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 15 because at that point, the FIS minimum age was 15, not 16. They
Okay.
bumped it up, I think, maybe 4 years after I started racing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, did that for 6 seasons and retired kind of like my junior year of college. And Kevin Francis was the coach of the MSU ski team at that point, and we'd had a good relationship, and like I was super involved with the team and had come to like every training, and like I don't know, we had formed a really good family feel at the Alpine team there, or
Right.
with the Alpine team there, and I was starting to not really love racing anymore and feeling a little lost and like didn't have much direction. And I remember Kevin just saying, well, it's okay to like want to quit ski racing, but you've got one more year of college and we all really like you, and the team loves you and you love the team. You should just stay on the MSU ski team, and still come to the training and kind of like show the freshmen what's up, how to be a good teammate and keep the stoke alive. So
Obi-Wan Kenobi of MSU's Alpine team.
yeah, yeah. No,
That's
so he convinced me to stay on the MSU team for one more year, and um, at the very least, like have some kind of like athletic outlet. Um,
yeah, you
even though,
definitely need that.
yeah.
So, what have you been up to since finishing college?
Well, I guess yeah. So that senior year of college, I wasn't racing anymore and got involved with the Freehill Life Cup that Josh used to organize at Grand Targhee.
Right.
Um, and by the time I had moved into the big mountain world of Telemark, that event still had a lot of competitors and it was a really cool community thing. But Targhee as a resort was kind of losing interest of hosting.
Right.
So that happened for 3 seasons. And then they finally kind of put the kibosh on it. Um, and then I think, yeah, they moved down to like some resorts in New Mexico and maybe one in Colorado to kind of continue on, but they were more like junior comps.
Right.
Um, but yeah, after college, I kind of had a year in limbo of like, so you have a college degree, like, what are you gonna do with it?
May I ask what your college degree is in?
Yeah, it's kind of an overarching liberal studies degree,
Okay.
in global and multicultural studies, with a double major in Latin American and Latino studies and a minor in Hispanic studies.
Cool.
So really to use it, I would have had to go into some kind of like human relations and probably move to more of like a border state,
Right.
um, to use it.
Well, you live in a
Uh,
border state. You live in Montana, man.
I have it. They're kind of the wrong country.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, the degree was super cool because learning Spanish and learning a lot of Hispanic and Spanish history was fun. But again, it was kind of just more of like what I was interested in at the time. It wasn't like
Right.
something that I was going to try and pursue a career with. But Montana State had a pretty cool study abroad program in the summertime that was down in Nicaragua. So I did that. And then, like any good basic white girl, I then went down to Costa Rica to get my yoga teacher training.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, I got to use my Spanish quite a bit that summer, that I had graduated. And
It's amazing when you immerse yourself in a situation like that, how your language skills improve.
yeah,
That's
totally.
like us with Quebec. I'm originally from Montreal. I still have a cottage on the Quebec Vermont border, and we had to rebuild our cottage this year. So I spent an awful lot of time, and I have worked in the construction industry for a long time. And it's like, yeah, I spent an entire afternoon with the window guy and Google Translate because the technical stuff does not translate very well.
Yeah.
But other than that, I would start conversations with, excuse me, I'm an Anglophone from Ontario. My French sucks. And I'd have these conversations, and I'm sure by the end they're like, yeah, this guy's full of shit. Because I could feel my French getting better and better and better with every conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's like what it takes is either struggling through it or like I don't know. That's the same. My aunt moved to Sweden after college because she married a Swedish guy. Hence why I have
Hmm.
Swedish cousins. And, like when she first got over there, she was trying so hard to learn Swedish. And she went to the post office and she's trying to like mail a package. And the guy, there's a big long line behind her. And I guess the guy kind of leaned across the counter and in English, he just goes, this would actually move a lot quicker if we both spoke English. She was just like, oh no, like you can tell.
Yeah, you can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool. So you went down, got your yoga teaching.
Yeah. And then had kind of a year, like came back to Bozeman and had my degree and wasn't using it, obviously. But started teaching yoga at a local studio in Bozeman and then um, was working. And eventually I was like, I got to do something more with my brain because I was making sandwiches
Mm-hmm.
for work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not a lot of brain power. So I ended up getting my EMT the following fall after my first season of river guiding up in Glacier, Montana, like kind of
Yep.
near Glacier National Park there.
Yep.
Um, got my EMT and then got hired on to ski patrol at Big Sky.
Very
So
cool. And that's your full-time gig now?
yeah, yeah. In the winter, I
I should tell
work
my
at Big.
daughter that. She should do that.
Yeah.
Because she went through to be a firefighter, so she's got like training up the wazoo, and I can't
Mhm.
remember what some of the first responder training is, but it's like right below EMT.
Okay.
It's like I should tell her to, you know what, you should go to the U.S. and work as a patroller, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I think it's a great outlet for people who like maybe were ski racers or any kind of competitive skier or like grew up skiing and really like it. And I don't know, it helps with the whole struggle of if you feel like you don't have time to necessarily like work and ski or like work and ski and then still go to the gym, like it keeps you fit and you get to ski for work,
right.
obviously.
That
So,
was that was like me. I tied my cycling into my job, so I rode my bicycle to work every day for almost 30 years, even in the wintertime. It was great.
wow.
I'd roll into school, and the custodian would say, "You rode today?" I was like, "Yeah." It's a snow day. I was like, "Oh, I was wondering why there was nobody on the road." But you know what? If you know where to ride and how to ride, snowstorms aren't a problem.
Yeah. And if you've got gloves and a hat and, all the things.
Yeah, basically, you just have to dress like you're out cross country skiing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little more about the big mountain skiing part of your journey with some of the comps that you were in and stuff.
Yeah. So, like I was saying, they were all the Targi ones. So they
Okay.
weren't necessarily like part of a circuit, but it was really cool. The first year I showed up, so that would have been the 2015, 2016 season. So the 2016 Free Hill Life Cup. And yeah, I was like freshly retired from ski racing, had this amazing community of telemark racers, but they're all in Europe.
Right.
So I was walking into a community where I knew some people, like from Bozeman, like Mackenzie Maley was there and Andrew Shower. And then from there, I mean, and then Josh was there, obviously, because he was the master behind it all.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I got to meet so many cool new people, and I was really intimidated at first, but they were all really nice because most telemark skiers are really nice.
That's what I'm getting from this. Everybody says that, but everybody knows, right? What
Yeah.
the community is like. I don't think I've ever really come across a complete a-hole as a telemark skier.
Yeah. No.
They're all really cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah.
So
Great.
when you were talking about the free heel, or sorry, the big mountain stuff, it made me think about you're racing in Europe and that community over there. So you raced over there. Did you race many races in a season, or just a few select ones?
Yeah. So, like, when I was still in high school, we kind of had to pick and choose because you had to fly over every time that you wanted to attend the race series. So, usually you'd try and pick like the ones that were back to back. Like, say there were three races in Germany and then three races in Austria. Like,
Right.
within like 3 days of each other. Or they did a lot of ones like that in France as well. Or like the Norwegian races, a lot of times it'd be like Hafjell and Rjukan or Bjorli and Rjukan.
Right.
So yeah, I would usually in high school, kind of early on, you'd do maybe like 2 to 3 sets of races. So you were never really in the running for like the overall World Cup titles.
Right.
We just didn't get out to as many. And then the US would host every other year. So on the years that the US would host, you would get the US races and then maybe 2 of those sets of races in Europe.
Very cool.
Yeah. But like always made it to World Junior Championships and World Championships that would happen every 2 years.
Right.
Yeah. And then there was one season, my freshman year of college, that I did the full World Cup circuit. I actually moved to France and lived with Jazz from the British team.
Okay, because you had mentioned how you raced against her. Now I know you lived with her too.
Yeah, we shared. Her parents have a flat in Les Houches.
Okay.
And originally, my senior year of high school, I was trying to figure out how to do a full World Cup circuit. And because I have Swedish cousins, I was like, oh, I should really figure out how to link up with Ulla Kolberg and like stay and like go to Sweden and train in Sweden and do that whole thing. And Ulla was like, yeah, maybe like, but we don't really have like a solid training schedule. And Sweden's a little far from like, all the other races. Like the Norwegians had like a Norwegian Cup for their own nationals, but like the French had a really good, like the French Cup circuit that had a lot of races. So you just got more time on the hill. And then I started talking to Jazz about maybe seeing if I could train with her and Seb, because Seb and my dad had built up a relationship over the years because Seb was at all the races and so was my dad, because we had a U.S. coach, Ty Upson, at the time. But the U.S. team really didn't have much funding. So your coach wouldn't necessarily come to every race with you because they would have to pay their way.
Yeah.
But because I was still under the age of 18, my dad would accompany me to every race.
Right.
So it was like, dad was kind of always around and chit-chatting with all the other coaches.
Yeah, Seb's a pretty cool guy. I got to meet with him and hang with him when the World Cup came to Vermont a few years back.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I would go around and, it seemed like all the teams hung out together. And I was like, how do you meet people? So I would go to and have meals at different teams' tables.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the only way you meet people,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
We're like traveling with them sometimes. I remember like in Norway, my first year, we were just teamed up with the Japanese and we were just hopping trains in Norway with the Japanese team. And like, I didn't know them very well, but like my other coach, Shane Anderson at the time, knew them pretty well. And I don't know, they didn't speak great English and we didn't speak any Japanese,
right.
But we made it to where we were supposed to go and we had a good time doing it. And,
that's awesome. And you know what I remember of like the European coaches, they all freaking smoke.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God. And like, they're the worst cigarettes too. You may as well just roll up hay or something and smoke it. Sorry, Seb, if you listen to these.
Yeah. No, Seb is like, well, at least when I was training with him, he was like the total master of like tobacco pouch in one hand, rolling his cigarette with the other. And then he'd like put it in his mouth and he'd be like, yeah, you have to ski faster. It's just what you must do. Like, he was just so funny and like blatant about things. And I don't know.
I love the, I don't know if you listened to the Jazz episode, but when she was trying to get a lesson with Seb and they would call up and he goes, no, I'm busy. He just kept like sandbagging her.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
She's like, what the heck? It's 4:00 in April. Like, what do you mean he's got stuff going on?
Yeah. So, what are you up to these days? Or, you know what? Before that, where else has Telemark taken you?
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess like with all the World Cups, I got to race in Austria, Spain, Germany, Slovenia, France.
Wow.
Way. We drove through Italy a couple times, but never actually raced there. I think the Italians have since hosted some World Cups.
Yeah. I think they have one this year because there's a young guy on the Canadian team who goes to university not far from my cottage, and he was just over at the cottage having dinner. So his mom's going over with him this year. She's all excited, and you know, he's a veteran of traveling over there, and I think he's racing in France, and the Canadian team, they train with Seb and the British team too, and talked about training and racing in Italy. So I think there's a race there this year.
Sweet, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Switzerland too used to host a lot of races.
Right. Now, do you ski in South America, Alaska, Japan?
I've never skied in South America. This March was the first time I ever went south.
Okay.
Well, farther south than Central America, we'll
Right.
say. So I did a river trip down in Peru, which was pretty epic. But yeah, never made it to South America to ski. And then it wasn't till 2 years after I stopped racing that I made it over to Japan. But that was like totally for just a fun ski trip with my parents and some of their friends.
Whereabouts did you go?
We went to the Hakuba Valley.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so we like flew into Tokyo and took the bullet train and did the whole thing. So
Yeah, I have an acquaintance who spends winters in Hakuba Valley.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Do they ski guide over there? Or?
No, he doesn't guide. He just skis, free skis. He's self-employed, and he goes over there. I think by now he may have purchased a place to stay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think he was on the national freestyle team because I remember I still am a telemark instructor, and I worked for a traveling telemark ski school, and Holly, the owner and lead instructor, she says, "Hey, Keith, go out with Brian." So I went out with Brian, and we're ripping these gigantic GS turns, and then like right off this little knoll, the guy pulls a 360, and he gets to the bottom, and he goes, "So, what do you think?" I went, "Well, if anything, you keep dropping your uphill shoulder." He goes, "Holly keeps saying that all the time too." I said, "Well, listen to Holly. She knows, man." But I was like, holy shit, she sent me out with this guy. Yeah. So, yeah. Anyways, it's lots of fun. Your river guiding career. Tell us a little more about that. Because you know what? This is about telemark skiing, but I find the sidebars really interesting. I don't know if you follow Christine Keeney, Knee Dipping Ginger. She's an East Coast hardcore 100-day plus a year skier. And she works in ground transportation. A lot of people, they're like, what's that? So she informed me that there's a corridor that goes from a green belt that goes from Florida to Maine that you can walk and ride your bicycle.
Oh.
So we talked all about that because I had a cycling club at school. So when I taught, so we just kind of like went off on that. And with Corey Schneider, we went off on biomechanics, and with Jazz, it was like sports psychology. So let's get into your river guiding.
Yeah, so kind of the same deal with like telemark and skiing. My parents were super into it like before I was born, and then when I was born, they kind of took me out on like the calmer rivers, and then when I was 5, they finally started taking me on like more multi-day trips with like class 3 whitewater, and we never really did like the paddle boating part of it, but it was always, you know, oar frames, multi-day trips. So like grew up doing like at least 2 week-long trips a summer, usually on like the Maine salmon or the San Juan or the Yampa.
Now the salmon, is that in Idaho?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
So there's like the Maine salmon, and then there's the Middle Fork of the salmon, which is where I guide now.
Okay.
But yeah, never did the Middle Fork as a kid, just the Maine. And then we had done the Colorado through the Grand Canyon when I was 13.
Wow.
And I was definitely like, when we got the call that our buddy had gotten a permit, I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, mom and dad are going on the Grand Canyon. Like, good for them. And my mom was like, well, you're coming. And I was just like, I am far too little. There is simply no way. Like, I will die. And she was like, no, you're not. You're a teenager now. You're going to be okay. And it was totally fine. It was a great trip.
Yeah, you're not a firstborn, are you?
I am, yeah.
Okay, that's
I'm
I
also an only
oh,
too.
are you okay? Because I was kind of like that. I would even today, as you know, a retired guy, because I just don't want to get hurt. I see my friends do stuff, and it's like, yeah, homie, don't play that. And my granddaughter, who's first born out of two, she's very observant and plays everything safe. And then she'll get into it. But her brother, on the other hand, he's basically like, yeah, hold my beer. I'll be back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you were spending time doing family trips, paddling, or I
Like
guess
row.
it's not paddling, right? What are you, rafting?
Yeah, rafting. So like, yeah, you've got the oar frames, and then you have like paddle boats, and
Right.
yeah, for our purposes, growing up, it was always rowing boats, and then my mom was super into duckying or like the inflatable kayaks.
Okay.
We had a lot of family friends that were like hard shell kayakers that would come on trips. So it was like I kind of learned how to row. I learned how to ducky. Hard shell kayaking never really took, although I'm getting into it now,
Okay.
which is cool. But I never really gave much thought to being a river guide when I was a kid. Um, and then kind of started college and realized that, college summers and having a job meant that you can't always go home for those river trips. And I don't know, I just realized that my parents' boat is my parents' boat. It's not my boat. Like,
Right.
I don't have all the tools to go rafting whenever I want. And all through college, I was pretty stressed out about that and didn't get on the river as much. And I realized that it was definitely something that I needed in my life. So,
Water's pretty cool like that.
eh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially like those multi day trips, just like getting to be out there and have, however many people on your trip. Like, those are the only people that matter for the next 7 to 21 days, depending on
That's,
the trip that you're
we would
doing.
do Lake Superior. In the Coast Guard, I would file and close the sail plan with the Coast Guard every day. And they're like, you're where? In
Mhm.
canoes? Why? And I said, it's beautiful. We'd be out for 3 weeks. We wouldn't see anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Oh, that's awesome.
just two red canoes. That was our call number, I guess, or registration number. Two red canoes. Yeah,
That's cute. That
yeah,
was a lot of
and you know what? It was saunas every night, and you know, the food that you take. It's the same thing. And one of our friends one day, one trip, he got so sick. He had just been to Mexico and he came home, so I kind of think he had Montezuma's revenge,
mm,
and he wasn't used to eating a lot of dehydrated foods and that sort of stuff. And man, he was really sick, so we had to cut our trip short, which kind of sucked, but
yeah.
safety is important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So you missed the water. You're getting into thinking about getting into guiding.
Yeah. So I finally got into guiding the summer of 2017 is when I went up to West Glacier, and it's the middle fork of the Flathead there. It's the like southern border of Glacier National Park.
Right.
Um, and that was all like paddle guiding. We did some overnights, but they were pretty quick. And then the company I was working for also had a permit to go up to the upper middle fork of the Flathead and the Great Bear Wilderness, which is part of the larger Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex.
Okay.
So those trips were pretty cool, but you had to be there for, like 4+ years before you were really guiding up there. And you flew in to a wilderness airstrip, or you used a pack string to get in.
Right.
So they were a little bit more like complicated and logistic faring things. But by my third year, I was trip leading just the quicker overnight multi-day trips or like 2-night trips.
Right.
Uh, and then I got to help out on one of the upper middle fork trips where we like took the pack strings in, blew up all the boats, assembled all the frames, and then myself and one other guide blew up the duckies and duckied the whole way out
Oh,
the same day,
right.
which was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Um, and then after that third summer up in Glacier, I knew that I wanted to do multi-day stuff, but you can't just be like, "Hey, I grew up like doing multi-days and I have no experience commercially guiding, but will you hire me?"
Right.
Like, you kind of have to have the certifications and all that. So, kind of put my time in day guiding and then applied to a Middle Fork company in 2020, ended up getting hired, and we ended up actually having a river season that year, even though COVID was looming and doing all of
Well,
its
you know,
things.
the outdoors was really good for COVID.
Yeah,
It's
it sure was.
it's like up here in Canada, they I don't know, they lost their shit in some areas. Like they closed golf courses. What? Like you're
Yeah.
outside, man. There's a group of four of you. You're with your friends, whatever. You're outside. There's only two people in a cart, you know, or you're walking. Like, what's the problem here? We were lucky because I don't know how big Bozeman is. A reasonable city, reasonable size. We live in a small town, and my daughter lives out even further. And she had just bought a house out there, so we were spending a lot of time out there helping her, you know, build the Fort Knox of chicken coops and putting in a big garden and all that sort of stuff. And the poor people in Toronto were like locked up and couldn't come out. They were on their verandas in all their condos. I was like, oh my God, I couldn't do that.
Yeah. No, I think, yeah, city dwellers definitely suffered during COVID.
Yes.
But yeah, like the crazy thing about the COVID summer on the Middle Fork of the Salmon was like, yeah, it was all people could talk about when they first showed up. Because being a guide, you were just out there. We were on 8-day rotations.
Right.
So there's obviously only 7 days in a week. And we're on these 8-day rotations. So we're like never having a day off and just constantly going and going and going. And, people would show up to the trip and they'd be like, oh, like, when's the last time you read the news? And you're like, I don't. And
Right.
then, they'd like start talking about developments or whatever with COVID. And then it was like by day 2, they didn't talk about it anymore. Like
Right.
nobody cared.
Right.
And it was just cool to like watch people like lose that stress
Yeah.
of the outside world.
It's like when I go to the cottage. Basically, the only English radio station we get is from Burlington, Vermont. They don't do a whole lot of news. So I'll be at the cottage for 3 weeks and I'll kind of, I wonder who the Prime Minister is of Canada. Is he still the same guy when I left? Like, who knows?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, having that time to not listen to all of the external stuff is pretty nice.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, now I've been on the Middle Fork of the Salmon for 5 seasons. And then I've been sandwiching the Middle Fork with rowing baggage on the Grand Canyon for another company.
Wow.
I'm not like a real guide down there, but you've got the boat with all the stuff, and you're still expected to like cook and help set up camp and do all the stuff. And
I always think, I don't know about Canada if we have the history about rowing in rivers, but I'll see the guys who fish in the rivers. They have those, they look like dory boats. That's what we call them in Canada and the East Coast. Kind of a flat bottom wooden boat, and they take down the rivers. I guess prospectors used them back in the day. But you use an inflatable version with the frame and all the gear lashed to it.
Yeah. And they still do use, so like dories are still used on the Grand Canyon with certain companies. The company I work for doesn't. And then on the Middle Fork, there's some companies that use drift boats.
Okay, yeah.
For like more fishing related trips. And they're called the Mackenzie River drift boats. So the sides are a bit higher and they have a little more rocker to handle the white water.
Right.
And like, if you're fishing a river that's a lot flatter, just like class 1 and 2 rapids, then yeah, your drift boat's a little bit, I don't know, flatter.
Yes.
And less rocker.
Right. Well, that's cool. So, goals for this season or just working?
Yeah, working, and like, I don't know, the ski patrol stuff is really awesome, and like we have a great ski patrol family, and we're all pretty supportive of each other.
Do you have a lot of free healers on the patrol?
Yeah, so
yeah, tell us
when I
about that.
first started, Big Sky's like a pretty big patrol because it's a big
Right.
area. So every day there's about 35 to 40 ski patrollers on the hill, and our total amount of like professional patrollers is like 120 or something.
Wow.
So lots of people. And when I first started, there were I think 18 people on tellies. So, it was about 18% because I think at that time we had like 100 on Pro Patrol. But it's the craziest thing. Like, so many people on that patrol make fun of telly skiing like the rest of the world because we're easy targets,
Yeah.
obviously. And in the last like 3 years, all of these people that have talked so much shit on telly skiing are all starting to change over to telemarking.
Yes.
And it's like people are either getting brand new NTN setups or they're just getting into it with like 75 mil stuff that they found at like the used sports shop, or like turning to the Telemark ski gear exchange on Facebook. And yeah, there are so many patrollers that are like so interested. And I think it's because in the last 3 years, we've had a pretty bad season and then like a pretty good season. And then last year was like one of the worst seasons
Oh,
ever.
really?
Yeah. For snow totals. We still had
Yep.
really good stoke and like high vibes. And like I spent a lot of time in the park, like learning how to do stupid tricks on features and guardrails. Didn't get very good, but it was something to do. But yeah, like all these patrollers are turning to tele skiing because they're like, well, if the skiing's not going to be great, like I might as well like learn something new. And there's a decent amount of them that have switched and got really good really fast. And they're like, I'm selling all my alpine gear. That's it. I'm done. I'm a telemark skier now. So, yeah, it's like pretty sweet to have watched.
We should get the shirts, or you guys should get the shirts for those guys that Josh had. You remember he had the dead telemarker t-shirt?
Yeah.
You should get like dead alpiner.
Yeah. Or like now too, like CJ's merch is all like the Alpine is dead stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Just get like a massive shipment of shirts and hats to the locker room. Like
Yes.
we've got dead telemark skiers and we've got like dead Alpine skiers now.
Yeah. You know what? I tell people this all the time, and the listeners will hear this. Like, I don't have an ACL in my right knee, and I don't have medial menisci in either one, and I just wear this sleeve called BioSkin, which is just a few millimeters thick, and that's what I ski on. I don't have to wear any big braces or anything like that, and it's all for telemark skiing. My wife, who has a fused spine and a Harrington rod in it, says telemark skiing is far easier on her body than alpine skiing ever was. And she grew up alpine skiing like all her life.
Yeah. Well, and that's what Corey used to say. There was a doctor at MSU, I'm forgetting his first name, but his last name's Seifert. So Dr. Seifert did all these studies about how quickly your knee flexes in the different snow sports.
Right.
And like if you take someone who's skiing like freestyle moguls, their knee is flexing really fast and it's like jarring for the knee.
Right.
And then if you take a telemark skier, it's flexing slower, so it's better for your knee.
Right.
And then he also had these studies of like, any ski that's over 100 millimeters underfoot, 100 millimeters underfoot, if it's over that, it's worse for your knees.
Right.
There's like more chatter, I guess.
Yes.
But yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah. I also know, I think what did my knee in was when the last time I fell off a roof and landed standing and tumbled and rolled. And my daughter, who's the firefighter, she was with me, but there was a fence separating us, so she couldn't quite get to me in time. But I remember this feeling of my calf on my hamstring, and I was like, oh, that's not good. That's not good. But it wasn't until a few years later that the knee started bothering me. So, but you know what? I may walk around with a limp a little bit, but when I'm on the ski hill, there's no limp and I can rip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. As long as you don't have pain while you're skiing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, now have I seen posts of like, out of all the telemark skiers on the patrol, there's a bunch of women also?
Yeah, on our patrol at Big Sky, I want to say there's probably half of us, maybe 40%. But there's a decent amount of female patrollers at Big Sky, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
We actually have a female director.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that's cool. And then, yeah, we've got females like in supervisor positions and trainer positions and Abby Tech positions. So it's pretty cool to see.
Look, it's like Bozeman is a leader.
Yeah.
Women in prominent, important positions.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And I think too, like Bozeman as a community, like we're definitely a liberal town within a more like a lesser liberal state. But for the most part, like the Bozeman community is pretty inclusive, and we don't have a ton of diversity, but I think the diversity we do have is represented fairly well. And I mean, I'm saying that as a white woman, so I can't totally speak to that in its full depth, but yeah, that was like me growing up as a kid. I was a basketball player. I spent a lot of times being a visible minority. Yeah, that's where I learned to jump. So yeah. Not on snow though. This body, like jumping and being on snow. I remember the first time doing a jump in a race. I did the warm up or the practice jump, and like they built the jump way too big. It wasn't built properly. You know how the parameters have to be, that the landing should be what the in run should be like. It was a flat, and I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. It's gonna hurt. Yeah. So, well, I want to say thank you for sitting down and talking with us and sharing your story. And I hope that some young women who are telemark skiers or alpine skiers listen to this and think, geez, that's a pretty cool career to be a pro patroller and a river guide. And so thank you very much for sitting down and doing this with me. Yeah, of course. And thanks for taking the time out of your day to.
Oh, it's nothing. I'm retired, man. Well, there you go, folks. Another episode of Women in Telemark Skiing brought to you by the Skippy Report. Huge thank you to Madi McKinstry talking to me all the way from Bozeman, Montana. If you're looking to check out what she's doing, what she's up to, she's on Instagram at Telly_Maddie. Anyways, thank you very much, Maddie. And thank you to all the women who are part of this series. You'll be able to catch another one in another 2 weeks. And thanks for listening to this series. Peace out.